The bruise on Lydia Vernon's cheek had turned a sickly shade of purple by the time she stumbled into the general store in White River, South Dakota, her hands trembling as she clutched the counter for support. It was late August of 1882, and the afternoon heat pressed down on the dusty streets like a heavy blanket, but Lydia felt cold to her bones despite the sweat beading on her forehead. She had trusted Marcus Whitfield with everything, had believed his smooth words and gentler promises when he courted her 6 months ago, had thought that marrying him would mean security and perhaps even happiness. Instead, she had learned what his fists felt like when his temper flared, what it meant to walk on eggshells in her own home, always wondering what small thing might set him off next. The storekeeper, an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, gasped when she saw Lydia's face. "Good Lord, child, what happened to you?" Lydia opened her mouth to speak, to offer the practiced lie about falling down the stairs, but the words would not come. Her throat tightened, and tears she had been holding back for weeks suddenly spilled over. Mrs. Patterson came around the counter quickly, her weathered hands gentle as she guided Lydia to a chair in the back room. The older woman did not press for answers, just brought her water and waited while Lydia tried to compose herself. "It was Marcus," Lydia finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "He gets angry and I cannot seem to do anything right anymore." Mrs. Patterson's expression hardened. "How long has this been going on?" 3 months, maybe longer. It started small, just harsh words and criticism. Then he grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks. Last night was the first time he actually struck my face. Lydia touched her cheek gingerly, wincing at the tenderness. "I left while he was sleeping. I do not know where to go or what to do. He will come looking for me." The bell above the front door chimed, and both women tensed. But it was not Marcus who entered. Instead, a tall cowboy with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair pushed back his worn Stetson and approached the counter. His clothes were dusty from the trail, and he moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. When he did not see anyone at the counter, he called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" Mrs. Patterson squeezed Lydia's shoulder. "Stay here," she murmured before going back to the front. Lydia heard the low rumble of the cowboy's voice asking for supplies, heard Mrs. Patterson listing off items. She tried to steady her breathing, tried to think of what she should do next. She had no family in White River, no friends close enough to impose upon, and precious little money of her own. The voices in the front room grew quieter, more serious, and then footsteps approached the back room. Lydia looked up to see the cowboy standing in the doorway, his dark eyes taking in her bruised face with an expression that shifted from surprise to concern to something harder, like anger held in check. "Madam," he said, removing his hat respectfully. "Mrs. Patterson says you might need some help." Lydia wanted to refuse, wanted to say she could handle this herself, but the words died on her lips. She was exhausted from months of fear, from the constant vigilance required to navigate Marcus's moods, from the desperate loneliness of having no one to turn to. This stranger with kind eyes might be her only chance. "My husband," she began, then stopped. Calling Marcus her husband felt wrong now, like claiming ownership of her own suffering. "The man I married has been hurting me. I left him this morning, but I have nowhere to go. He will search for me, and when he finds me, it will be worse than before." The cowboy's jaw tightened. He glanced at Mrs. Patterson, then back to Lydia. "My name is Jake Keller. I work at the Triple Bar Ranch about 15 miles west of town. The owner, Mr. Henderson, is a fair man, and his wife is one of the kindest women I have ever known. They have been looking for someone to help with the cooking and housework since their regular woman went to live with her daughter in Rapid City. If you want, I can take you there. You would be safe, have work and a place to stay. Lydia studied him carefully. She had trusted too easily before, had believed Marcus when he promised to cherish her, and look where that had led. But something in Jake Keller's steady gaze felt different. There was no calculation there, no hidden agenda that she could detect, just genuine concern from a stranger who had stumbled into her crisis. "Why would you help me?" she asked. "You do not even know me." "I do not need to know you to see that you are in trouble, madam. And I do not need to know anything more about your situation to understand that a man who would hit a woman is not worth the boots he stands in." Jake's voice was calm but firm. "I grew up watching my father treat my mother like a queen. He taught me and my brothers that protecting those weaker than yourself is not just the right thing to do, it is the only thing to do. So if you need protection from this man, I will keep you safe from him now." The simple declaration, spoken without bravado or arrogance, made something in Lydia's chest loosen. She nodded slowly. "I would be grateful for your help, Mr. Keller." "Jake," he corrected gently, "and we should leave soon before your husband starts looking for you in earnest." "Do you have anything you need to gather from your home?" Lydia shook her head. "Everything there belongs to him. I just want to leave." Mrs. Patterson packed a small bundle of food for the journey while Jake retrieved his horse from the hitching post outside. The animal was a sturdy buckskin gelding with intelligent eyes. Jake helped Lydia mount, then swung up behind her. She stiffened at the proximity, at the feeling of a man's arms on either side of her as he took the reins, but Jake seemed to sense her discomfort. He kept as much distance as possible while still ensuring she would not fall, and his voice was reassuring when he spoke. "It is about 2 hours to the ranch. We will take the back trails to avoid the main road. If your husband is looking for you, he will likely check the stage depot and the main routes out of town first." They left White River by a narrow path that wound through rocky terrain dotted with scrub brush and prairie grass. The sun beat down relentlessly, and Lydia was grateful when Jake offered her his canteen. She drank sparingly, aware that they might need the water to last. As they rode, Jake talked in a low, easy voice about the ranch, about the Hendersons and their 2 young children, about the work that filled his days. He did not press her for details about Marcus or her marriage, seemed content to let her volunteer information if and when she felt ready. His voice was soothing, and despite her exhaustion and fear, Lydia found herself relaxing slightly against him. "How long have you worked at the Triple Bar?" she asked after a while. "About 3 years now. I came up from Texas after my father died. My brothers took over the family ranch, but there were too many of us trying to make a living from the same land. Mr. Henderson was looking for experienced hands, and I needed a fresh start. It has been good work, good people." "You miss Texas?" "Sometimes. I miss my family, miss the wide open spaces down there. But South Dakota has its own beauty. The Black Hills especially when the light hits them just right." He paused. "What brought you to White River?" Lydia hesitated, then decided there was no harm in sharing. "I came from Chicago 2 years ago to teach at the schoolhouse. I thought I wanted adventure, wanted to see the frontier. Marcus was on the town council, always very polished and charming in public. When he started courting me, I thought I was lucky. A handsome, successful man who seemed to genuinely care about me. I was so naive." "You are not naive for believing someone when they tell you they love you," Jake said quietly. "That is trust, not stupidity. He is the one who broke that trust, who proved himself unworthy of it. That is his failing, not yours." The words settled over Lydia like a bomb. She had spent so many nights lying awake wondering what she had done wrong, how she had failed to be the wife Marcus wanted, whether she deserved his anger. To hear someone say plainly that the fault was his, not hers, made her throat tight with emotion. They rode in silence for a while longer, the only sounds the steady clip-clop of the horse's hooves and the occasional call of a bird overhead. The landscape around them was harsh but beautiful, all golden grass and endless sky. Lydia found herself noticing details she had missed in her months of living under Marcus's shadow. The way the wind made patterns in the grass, the deep blue of the afternoon sky, the way Jake sat in the saddle with the kind of ease that spoke of a lifetime on horseback. "Tell me about the Hendersons," she said, needing to focus on something other than her own thoughts. "What are they like?" Jake shifted slightly, adjusting their course to avoid a rocky outcropping. "Tom Henderson is probably 50 now, been ranching most of his life. He is fair with his workers, pays decent wages, does not ask anything of us he would not do himself. His wife, Sarah, is maybe 10 years younger. She came from Boston originally, followed Tom out here when they got married, and she has never regretted it as far as I can tell. They have 2 children, Emma, who is 8, and William, who is 6. Good kids, polite but full of energy. And you think they will really hire me, just like that?" Sarah has been complaining about needing help for 2 months now. She is trying to manage the house and the children and help with the ranch bookkeeping all at once. Tom has been asking around town, but most of the women in White River have their own families to tend to. You would be doing them a favor as much as they would be doing you one. The sun was lower in the sky when they finally crested a rise, and Lydia saw the Triple Bar Ranch spread out below them. It was more substantial than she had expected. A large main house with a covered porch, a barn and several outbuildings, corrals with horses and cattle visible in the distance. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, and Lydia could see a woman hanging laundry on a line near the back door. Jake guided the horse down the slope toward the house. As they approached, the woman at the clothesline looked up, shading her eyes against the sun. She called something toward the house, and a moment later a tall man emerged, wiping his hands on a rag. "Jake?" Tom Henderson called out as they drew closer. "Did not expect you back until tomorrow. Everything all right?" Jake dismounted and then helped Lydia down, his hands steady at her waist. She tried not to flinch at the contact, tried to remind herself that this was not Marcus, that not all men were dangerous. When her feet touched the ground, she swayed slightly, dizzy from the heat and the emotional toll of the day. Sarah Henderson reached them first, her quick eyes taking in Lydia's bruised face and exhausted state. "Tom, fetch some water. Jake, help me get this poor girl inside where it is cooler." She did not ask questions, just took Lydia's arm gently and guided her toward the house. Inside, the main room was spacious and blessedly cool, with windows open to catch the breeze. Sarah settled Lydia into a comfortable chair and pressed a cup of cold water into her hands. Tom and Jake stood near the door, speaking in low voices. Lydia caught fragments of their conversation. "Husband, violence, needs a safe place." When Tom approached her, his weathered face was kind but serious. "Madam, Jake has told me a bit about your situation. I want you to know that you are welcome here for as long as you need. My wife could certainly use help around the house, and we have a small room off the kitchen that we can fix up for you. But I need to know, is your husband the kind of man who will come looking for you with violence in mind?" Lydia met his gaze steadily. "I do not know. Marcus cares a great deal about his reputation in town. He might not want it known that I left him. But he also has a terrible temper and he considers me his property. I honestly cannot say what he will do." Tom nodded slowly. "Well then, we will be prepared either way. You will stay here, work for us if you are able, and if this Marcus fellow shows up, we will deal with him." He glanced at Jake. "I want men posted watching the main road for the next few days. If anyone comes asking about a woman matching her description, I want to know immediately. I will take first watch tonight, Jake volunteered. Over the next few days, Lydia began to settle into life at the Triple Bar Ranch. Sarah Henderson was as kind as Jake had promised, patient in showing Lydia the routines of the household without making her feel incompetent. The children, Emma and William, were initially shy around the new woman with the fading bruise on her face, but they warmed to her quickly when she proved willing to play games and tell stories while she worked. The work itself was hard but honest. Cooking for the family and the ranch hands, washing and mending clothes, keeping the house clean, helping Sarah with the endless tasks required to keep a ranch household running. Lydia found that she did not mind the labor. In fact, there was something deeply satisfying about it, about seeing the tangible results of her efforts. It was so different from her marriage to Marcus, where nothing she did ever seemed good enough, where success was measured by the absence of criticism rather than the presence of praise. Jake was often around the main house, always finding some excuse to check in. He would carry water from the well, chop extra firewood, help Sarah move heavy furniture when she decided to rearrange a room. Lydia noticed that he seemed to time his visits for when she might be outside hanging laundry or tending the kitchen garden, always offering a greeting and a few minutes of easy conversation. On her fourth day at the ranch, Lydia was in the garden pulling weeds when Jake appeared with a basket of vegetables from the root cellar. He set it down near her and crouched beside her in the dirt, his long fingers surprisingly deft as he helped remove the stubborn roots of a particularly persistent weed. "How are you settling in?" he asked, his voice casual but his eyes watchful. "Better than I expected," Lydia admitted. "The Hendersons are wonderful, and it feels good to work, to be useful without fear of doing something wrong." "You are doing more than being useful. Sarah told Tom last night that you are the best help she has ever had, that you anticipate what needs to be done before she even asks." Lydia felt a flush of pleasure at the compliment. That is kind of her to say. It is the truth. Jake pulled another weed and tossed it into the pile. "Has there been any word from town, any sign of Marcus? Not that I know of. Part of me keeps waiting for him to appear, for everything to fall apart again. It is hard to believe that I might actually be safe here." Jake was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. When he spoke again, his voice was serious. "I meant what I said in town, Lydia. I will keep you safe from him now, whatever it takes. You do not have to live in fear anymore." The use of her first name sent a small thrill through her. Since arriving at the ranch, Jake had been unfailingly polite, always calling her Miss Vernon despite her married status. Hearing her name on his lips felt intimate, like a small bridge being built between them. "Thank you, Jake. I do not know how to repay your kindness." "There is nothing to repay. You would do the same for someone else if the situations were reversed, I would wager." He was right, she realized. She would help someone in need without expecting repayment. Why was it so hard to accept the same from others? That evening, after dinner was cleared and the children were in bed, Lydia sat on the porch with Sarah, enjoying the relative cool of the night air. The older woman worked on her mending while Lydia shelled peas for the next day's meal, the comfortable silence between them broken only by the chirp of crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. "Jake is a good man," Sarah said suddenly, her eyes still on her needlework. Lydia felt her cheeks warm. "Yes, he seems to be. He has not shown much interest in courting since he came to the ranch. There was a girl in town a while back, the banker's daughter, who made it clear she would welcome his attention. But Jake was not interested. Said she seemed more concerned with appearances than substance." Sarah glanced up with a small smile. "He looks at you differently than he has looked at any other woman. I thought you should know." Sarah, I am still married. Even if I wanted to pursue something with Jake, which I am not saying I do, I cannot. Marcus and I are legally bound. Legal bonds can be broken, especially when those bonds have been violated by violence. I know a lawyer in Rapid City who handles such matters. If you wanted to pursue a divorce, I could write to him on your behalf. Lydia set down the bowl of peas, her hands suddenly shaking. In Chicago, divorce was scandalous. Women who left their husbands were shunned, treated as fallen women. Is it different here? This is the frontier, my dear. People come here to start over, to leave behind the rigid rules of Eastern society. We care more about a person's character than their past. If you left your husband because he beat you, no one here would hold that against you. In fact, most would applaud your courage. The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. To be truly free of Marcus, to no longer be bound to him by law or obligation, felt almost too good to be possible. I will think about it, Lydia said quietly. Sarah reached over and squeezed her hand. Take your time. You are safe here, and there is no rush to make decisions. I just wanted you to know that you have options. That night, lying in her small room off the kitchen, Lydia let herself imagine a different future, one where she was not Mrs. Marcus Whitfield, not defined by her failed marriage and her husband's violence. One where she was simply Lydia Vernon, a woman free to make her own choices, to perhaps even find love again with someone who would treat her with the respect and care she deserved. The image that came to mind was of Jake Keller's steady dark eyes, his quiet strength, the way he made her feel safe without making her feel weak. The following week brought a spell of particularly hot weather that left everyone on the ranch moving slowly and seeking shade whenever possible. The cattle grew restless, and the ranch hands worked long hours ensuring all the animals had access to water. Jake was often gone from dawn until well after dark, and Lydia found herself watching for his return each evening, a realization that both pleased and worried her. She was hanging laundry one afternoon when a rider appeared on the main road leading to the ranch. Her hand stilled on the wet sheet she was pinning to the line as she recognized the horse, a gray gelding that Marcus had been particularly proud of. Her blood turned to ice as she watched Marcus ride up to the main house, his posture radiating anger even from a distance. Tom Henderson emerged from the barn, positioning himself between Marcus and the house. Lydia could not hear what was being said, but she could see Marcus gesturing emphatically, could see Tom's stolid, unmoved stance. After a few minutes, Marcus pointed directly at Lydia, his face flushed red even from 50 yards away. Lydia forced herself to stay where she was, forced herself not to run or cower. She had done nothing wrong. She had every right to leave a man who hurt her. The confrontation seemed to escalate, Marcus's voice rising loud enough that Lydia could catch fragments. My wife. No right to keep her here. The law. Tom's response was calmer but no less firm. Lydia saw him shake his head, saw him gesture back toward the road. Marcus did not move. Instead, he dismounted and took a step toward the house. That was when Jake appeared, seemingly from nowhere. He must have been working near the barn and heard the commotion. He stepped up beside Tom, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip in a gesture that was not quite a threat but definitely a warning. Lydia could not breathe. She watched the three men face each other, watched Marcus's bluster begin to fade as he realized he was outnumbered. The confrontation lasted another few minutes before Marcus finally remounted his horse. But before he rode off, he looked directly at Lydia and the promise in his eyes was clear. This was not over. Jake crossed the yard to her as soon as Marcus was out of sight. Are you all right? Lydia nodded, though her hands were shaking. What did he say? He demanded that Tom turn you over to him, said you belonged to him, and that keeping you here was theft. Tom told him that you are a grown woman free to work where you choose, and that if Marcus had treated you properly, you would not have needed to leave. Marcus threatened to go to the sheriff, but Tom pointed out that assault is also a crime, and that your bruises were well documented by Mrs. Patterson and now by everyone here. He will not give up, Lydia whispered. Marcus hates losing, hates being defied. He will find a way to get to me. Jake's expression hardened. Then we will make sure he does not succeed. Come on, let us go inside. I want you to stay close to the house for the next few days, at least until we can figure out what Marcus's next move might be. That evening, Tom called a meeting with all the ranch hands. Lydia listened from the kitchen as he explained the situation, as he made it clear that Lydia was under the ranch's protection, and that anyone who tried to harm her or force her to leave would answer to him personally. The men's response was immediate and unanimous. They would help keep watch, would make sure Lydia was never alone outside the main house, would ensure Marcus could not get to her. The solidarity moved Lydia to tears. These men barely knew her, yet they were willing to stand between her and danger without hesitation. It was so different from the isolation she had felt in her marriage, where Marcus had systematically cut her off from friends and neighbors, making her dependent solely on him. Jake found her in the kitchen after the meeting, wiping away tears as she washed the dinner dishes. "Hey," he said softly, taking the dish from her hands and setting it down. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong, that is the problem. I am not used to people being kind without expecting something in return. I am not used to feeling like I matter, like my safety is worth protecting. You matter, Lydia. You matter to the Hendersons, to the men here on the ranch." He paused, his dark eyes searching hers. "You matter to me." The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility and promise. Lydia felt her breath catch, felt the warmth of his presence like a physical thing. Without thinking, she reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "You matter to me too," she whispered. Jake's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. "I know the timing is not ideal. I know you are still dealing with Marcus and the trauma of what he put you through. But I need you to know that when you are ready, if you are ever ready, I would like the chance to court you properly. To show you what it means to be cherished rather than controlled." Lydia felt tears spring to her eyes again, but these were different tears, born of hope rather than pain. "I would like that, Jake, very much. But first, I need to be free of Marcus legally. I need to know that I am truly my own person before I can give myself to someone else. Then we will make that happen. Sarah mentioned she knows a lawyer in Rapid City. What if I rode there tomorrow and brought him back here? He could talk to you about the process, about what you would need to do to obtain a divorce. You would do that. Ride all the way to Rapid City for me, Lydia. I would ride to the ends of the earth if it meant helping you find peace and freedom." The simple sincerity in his voice made her believe him. True to his word, Jake left before dawn the next morning for Rapid City. The journey would take him the better part of 2 days round trip, but he had refused to let anyone else go, insisting that he wanted to personally ensure the lawyer understood the urgency of the situation. With Jake gone, Lydia felt his absence like a physical ache. She had not realized how much she had come to depend on his presence, on the sense of safety and comfort he provided. But she forced herself to focus on her work, on helping Sarah with the endless tasks of running the household. On the second day after Jake's departure, Lydia was in the henhouse gathering eggs when she heard a noise behind her. She turned to find Marcus standing in the doorway, blocking her exit. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she backed away, the basket of eggs clutched to her chest like a shield. "Lydia," Marcus said, his voice deceptively calm, "we need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Please leave. You are my wife. You belong with me, not here playing servant to these people." He took a step closer, and Lydia could smell the whiskey on his breath. "This has gone on long enough. You are coming home with me today." "No." The word came out stronger than Lydia felt. "I am not going anywhere with you. Our marriage is over, Marcus." His face flushed dark red the way it always did before his temper exploded. "You do not get to decide that. I am your husband, and you will obey me." He lunged for her, but Lydia had learned to anticipate his movements during their months together. She ducked under his outstretched arm and bolted for the door, screaming for help. Marcus caught her by the back of her dress, the fabric tearing as she wrenched away from him. She stumbled into the yard, still screaming, just as Tom and two of the ranch hands came running from the barn. Marcus emerged from the henhouse a moment later, and the sight of the three men brought him up short. But the whiskey had made him reckless, and instead of retreating, he drew the pistol from his belt. "She is my wife, and I am taking her home," he said, leveling the gun at Tom. "Anyone who tries to stop me will regret it." Tom held up his hands in a placating gesture. "Now, Marcus, there is no need for violence. Let us talk about this like reasonable men." "There is nothing to talk about. Lydia, get your things. We are leaving now." Lydia stood frozen, terrified that Marcus would actually shoot someone, that her decision to leave would result in innocent people getting hurt. But before she could move or speak, a rifle shot cracked through the air. Everyone jumped, and Marcus's pistol fell from his hand as he clutched his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. Sarah Henderson stood on the porch of the main house, a smoking rifle in her hands. Her face was calm, but her eyes were steel. "The next shot will not just graze you, Marcus Whitfield. You will get on your horse and ride back to White River, or I will put a bullet somewhere more permanent. And before you think about pressing charges, know that every person on this ranch will testify that you drew on us first, that you threatened violence, and that I acted in defense of my family and my household." Marcus looked around at the circle of hard faces, at the guns now trained on him, and whatever bravado the whiskey had given him drained away. He stumbled to his horse, clutching his wounded shoulder, and hauled himself into the saddle. Before he rode off, he looked at Lydia one last time. "This is not over," he said, his voice thick with pain and fury. "Yes, it is," Lydia replied, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "You have no power over me anymore, Marcus. Go back to White River and tell whatever lies you want about why I left. I do not care. I am free of you." She watched him ride away, and with each step his horse took, she felt lighter, as though a crushing weight was being lifted from her shoulders. When he was finally out of sight, her legs gave out and she sank to the ground, shaking with reaction. Tom and Sarah surrounded her, their concern evident, but it was Sarah who pulled her into a tight embrace. "You are safe now, my dear. You were so brave." "I was terrified," Lydia admitted, her voice muffled against Sarah's shoulder. "Bravery is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite the fear. And you did that beautifully." That evening, Jake returned with the lawyer, a middle-aged man named Mr. Carlson who had kind eyes and a professional demeanor that immediately put Lydia at ease. Over dinner, Tom and Sarah recounted the day's events, and Mr. Carlson's expression grew increasingly grave. "What Marcus did today, threatening you with a weapon, gives us even more grounds for divorce," he told Lydia. "We can file on the basis of abuse and cruelty, which any judge will recognize as valid cause. The fact that he was wounded while perpetrating a crime means he will be unlikely to contest the proceedings for fear of facing charges himself." "How long will it take?" Lydia asked. "A few months at minimum. We will need to file the papers in Deadwood, where the territorial court sits. You will need to testify about the abuse you suffered, and we will need witnesses to corroborate your claims. but given the circumstances, I am confident the divorce will be granted." The process began immediately. Mr. Carlson stayed at the ranch for 2 days, taking detailed statements from Lydia, from Mrs. Patterson in town who had witnessed her bruises, from Tom and Sarah, and the ranch hands who had been present during Marcus's attacks. The lawyer was thorough but gentle, never pressing Lydia for more detail than she was comfortable providing. When he finally departed for Deadwood to file the papers, Lydia felt as though she could breathe fully for the first time in months. The path to freedom was long, but at least she was on it now. Jake had been quiet during Mr. Carlson's stay, giving Lydia space to focus on the legal proceedings. But the evening after the lawyer left, he found her sitting on the porch steps, watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold across the prairie. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Please do." He settled beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. For a long moment they sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade from the sky. "You were very brave yesterday," Jake finally said, "standing up to Marcus like that, even when he had a gun." "I did not feel brave. I felt terrified, but I was also angry, angrier than I have ever been. Angry that he thought he could just take me, that he believed he had the right to control me. That anger made me strong, I think. Anger can be useful as long as you do not let it consume you. But you should be proud of yourself, Lydia. You have come so far in such a short time." She turned to look at him, at his strong profile silhouetted against the darkening sky. "I could not have done any of this without you. You gave me a safe place to land, a chance to find my strength again. How can I ever thank you for that?" Jake met her gaze, and the tenderness in his eyes made her breath catch. "You do not need to thank me. Watching you reclaim your life, seeing you smile again, that is all the thanks I need." He paused, then added quietly, "But when you are ready, when you are truly free, I would very much like to kiss you." Lydia felt heat rise in her cheeks, felt a flutter of anticipation in her stomach that was entirely pleasant. "I would like that too. Then I will wait. However long it takes, I will wait for you." The months that followed were some of the most peaceful and purposeful of Lydia's life. She threw herself into her work at the ranch, finding joy in the rhythms of daily life. She grew to love the Hendersons and their children, to appreciate the honest labor of cooking and cleaning and tending the garden. She made friends among the ranch hands, learning their stories and sharing her own. She watched the seasons change, from the last golden days of summer into the crisp cool of autumn. And through it all, Jake was there, not hovering or possessive, but present. He continued to find excuses to be near her, to engage her in conversation, to make her laugh with stories from his day. He taught her to ride properly, patient as she learned to trust both the horse and herself. He brought her wildflowers from the prairie, small bouquets that she would arrange in a jar on the kitchen windowsill. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give, content to let their relationship develop at its own pace. In October, word came from Mr. Carlson that the divorce hearing was scheduled for early December. Lydia would need to travel to Deadwood to testify before the judge. The news filled her with a mixture of anxiety and relief. She was nervous about facing a courtroom, about having to recount the details of her marriage in front of strangers. But she was also eager to have the ordeal finished, to be legally free of Marcus once and for all. Jake insisted on accompanying her to Deadwood, and Tom agreed readily. "You should not have to face this alone," Jake said. "And besides, I have always wanted to see Deadwood. I hear it is quite the town." They left the ranch in early December, the weather turning cold as they traveled north through the Black Hills. Mr. Carlson had arranged for them to stay at a respectable boarding house near the courthouse, and Lydia was grateful for the proprietor's kindness, when the older woman showed them to their separate rooms without a hint of judgment. The hearing was scheduled for the following morning. Lydia barely slept that night, her mind racing with worries about what she would say, how she would hold herself together while recounting the abuse she had suffered. But when Jake came to escort her to the courthouse the next morning, his steady presence calmed her nerves. The courtroom was smaller than she had expected, less intimidating. Mr. Carlson met them outside and walked Lydia through what would happen. She would take the stand, he would ask her questions, and then the judge would make his decision. Marcus had been served with papers but had not appeared, which Mr. Carlson said actually worked in their favor. It suggested he had no defense to offer against her claims. When Lydia took the stand, her hands were shaking. But as she began to speak, answering Mr. Carlson's gentle questions, she found her voice growing stronger. She told the judge about Marcus's temper, about the escalating violence, about the fear that had permeated every moment of her life with him. She described the day she had fled to Mrs. Patterson's store, the bruise on her face, the terror of having nowhere to turn. Then she described the Hendersons' kindness, the protection she had found at the Triple Bar Ranch, and Marcus's attempts to take her back by force. She did not embellish or dramatize. She simply told the truth in clear, steady sentences. When she finished, the judge looked at her for a long moment. He was an older man with silver hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades on the frontier. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, "or should I say Miss Vernon, since it seems clear to me that your marriage was a travesty from the start. I have heard enough. The abuse you describe is more than sufficient grounds for divorce. I am granting your petition effective immediately. You are free to resume your maiden name and to consider yourself no longer bound to Marcus Whitfield in any way." The relief that washed over Lydia was so intense she felt dizzy. Mr. Carlson steadied her as she stepped down from the witness stand, his professional demeanor cracking into a genuine smile. "Congratulations, Miss Vernon. You are a free woman." Outside the courthouse, Jake was waiting. When he saw her face, saw the joy and relief written there, he opened his arms and Lydia walked into them without hesitation. He held her carefully, as though she were something precious, and Lydia let herself lean into his strength. "It is over," she whispered against his chest. "I am really free." "You are free," he confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "And I am so proud of you." They stayed in Deadwood for 2 more days, partly to finalize the paperwork with Mr. Carlson and partly because Jake wanted to give Lydia time to absorb the magnitude of what had happened. They walked through the bustling streets of the mining town, saw the famous saloons and theaters, ate dinner at a restaurant that served steaks so large they hung off the edges of the plates. On their last evening in Deadwood, Jake took Lydia to a small park overlooking the town. The air was crisp and cold, their breath making white clouds in the gathering dusk. From their vantage point, they could see the lights beginning to glow in windows all across the valley, could hear the distant sounds of piano music and laughter drifting up from the saloons. "Lydia," Jake said, turning to face her, "I know we have talked about this before, about me courting you once you were free, but I want to make sure you know that there is no pressure. You have been through so much, and you deserve time to figure out who you are as a free woman, without any man's expectations weighing on you." Lydia looked up at him, at his dear, familiar face, and felt her heart swell with affection and something deeper, something she had not expected to feel again so soon. "Jake, I do know who I am. I have spent these past months discovering exactly that. I am a woman who is stronger than she ever knew, who has faced her fears and survived. I am a woman who knows the difference between a man who seeks to control and a man who seeks to cherish. And I am a woman who has fallen in love with you." The last words came out in a rush, and Lydia felt her cheeks burn with a mixture of embarrassment and exhilaration. She had not planned to confess her feelings so boldly, but once the words were out, she knew they were true. Somewhere between that first terrified ride from White River and this moment overlooking Deadwood, she had fallen completely and irrevocably in love with Jake Keller. Jake's expression shifted from surprise to wonder to pure joy. "You love me." "I do. I love your kindness and your strength. I love the way you make me laugh, and the way you have never once made me feel weak or foolish. I love that you waited for me, that you gave me space to heal without making me feel abandoned. I love you, Jake Keller, and if you still want to court me, I would be honored." In answer, Jake cupped her face gently in his hands and kissed her. It was nothing like the kisses Marcus had demanded, all possession and hunger. Jake's kiss was tender and questioning, giving rather than taking. Lydia felt tears slip down her cheeks as she kissed him back, pouring all her gratitude and affection and newfound love into that one perfect moment. When they finally pulled apart, Jake rested his forehead against hers. "I love you too, Lydia Vernon. I think I have loved you since that first day in Mrs. Patterson's store, when you looked up at me with those bruised eyes and I knew I would do anything to keep you safe. And now, I want to do more than keep you safe. I want to make you happy. I want to build a life with you if you will have me." "I will," Lydia whispered. "I want that more than anything." They returned to the Triple Bar Ranch a few days later, and if the Hendersons noticed that Jake and Lydia now held hands openly and stole kisses when they thought no one was looking, they were kind enough not to comment. But Sarah's knowing smile and Tom's pleased nod told Lydia they approved of the match. Christmas came, and with it a celebration at the ranch that included all the hands and several neighboring families. Lydia cooked for days in preparation, making pies and roasts and all manner of festive foods. Emma and William helped her decorate the house with pine boughs and ribbons, their excitement infectious. On Christmas morning, after the presents had been opened and the children were playing with their new toys, Jake pulled Lydia aside. They stood in the parlor, away from the cheerful chaos, and Jake took both her hands in his. "I know we have only been officially courting for a few weeks," he began, "and I know that rushing things is probably not wise given everything you have been through. But I also know that when something is right, waiting does not make it any more right. It just delays the happiness." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Lydia's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond chip set in the center. It was not fancy or ostentatious, but it was beautiful in its simplicity. "Lydia Vernon, would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? I promise to spend every day of my life showing you what real love looks like, what it means to be truly cherished and respected. I promise to listen to you, to value your opinions, to never make you feel small or afraid. I promise to be your partner in all things, to share both the burdens and the joys of life. What do you say?" Lydia looked at the ring, then at Jake's hopeful face and felt her heart overflow with happiness. A year ago, she would never have believed it possible to feel this way again, to trust a man with her heart and her future. But Jake was not just any man. He was the man who had saved her, who had shown her what real strength looked like, who had waited patiently while she found herself again. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, I will marry you, Jake Keller. I cannot imagine anything that would make me happier." Jake slipped the ring onto her finger and then swept her into his arms, spinning her around as they both laughed. The sound drew the others from the kitchen, and soon Sarah was crying happy tears and Tom was shaking Jake's hand, and the children were demanding to know what all the fuss was about. They were married in early March of 1883, in a simple ceremony at the small church in White River. Sarah stood up as Lydia's matron of honor, and Tom served as Jake's best man. Emma and William scattered wildflowers down the aisle, delighted to be part of the celebration. The whole town turned out for the wedding, and if any of them remembered the scandal of Lydia's first marriage, they had the grace not to mention it. All that mattered was the obvious love between the bride and groom, the way they looked at each other as though no one else existed. Mrs. Patterson provided the cake, a towering confection that she swore contained her secret recipe. When Lydia thanked her for everything she had done, for being there at the very beginning when Lydia had been at her lowest point, the older woman just patted her hand and said, "You would have found your way out eventually, dear. You are stronger than you know. I am just glad I could help point you in the right direction." After the wedding, Jake and Lydia moved into a small house on the edge of the Triple Bar property. Tom had offered it to them as a wedding gift, saying he had always intended to build foreman's quarters eventually, and now was as good a time as any. The house was modest but cozy, with 2 rooms downstairs and a sleeping loft above. Lydia hung curtains she had sewn herself and arranged furniture that Sarah had helped her pick out during a trip to Rapid City. It was the first home that was truly hers, the first place where she felt completely safe and completely free. Jake continued to work as the ranch foreman, a promotion Tom had given him after the wedding. The work was demanding but rewarding, and Jake was good at it, managing the hands with a firm but fair approach that earned their respect. Lydia kept house and continued to help Sarah when needed, but she also began to pursue interests she had neglected during her marriage to Marcus. She started a garden, spending hours coaxing vegetables and flowers from the South Dakota soil. She resumed teaching, offering lessons to Emma and William, and several of the ranch hands' children in the evenings. She wrote letters to her family back in Chicago, re-establishing connections she had let lapse during her difficult marriage. Life was not perfect. Some nights, Lydia still woke with nightmares about Marcus, still felt the phantom weight of his control. But Jake was always there, patient and understanding, holding her until the fear passed. He never made her feel weak for struggling, never demanded that she just get over her past trauma. He simply loved her through it, steady and constant as the North Star. In the autumn of their first year of marriage, Lydia discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. She had never thought much about having children during her marriage to Marcus, had actually been relieved that she had never conceived. The idea of bringing a child into that atmosphere of fear and violence had been unthinkable, but this was different. This child would be wanted and loved, would grow up in a home filled with laughter and kindness. Still, Lydia worried. What if she was not a good mother? What if her experiences had damaged her somehow, made her incapable of providing the love and security a child needed? Jake, as always, seemed to understand her unspoken fears. "You are going to be an amazing mother," he told her one evening as they sat together watching the sunset. His hand rested on her still flat stomach, his touch gentle and reverent. "Look at how much you love Emma and William, at how patient you are teaching them. Look at how you nurture your garden, how you pour care into everything you do. Our child will be so lucky to have you." "I am scared," Lydia admitted. "Scared that I do not know how to do this, that my own childhood was not happy enough to serve as a good model. Then we will figure it out together. We will make mistakes, because all parents do, but we will also love our child fiercely and unconditionally. We will create the kind of home where our children feel safe to be themselves, where they never have to walk on eggshells or fear sudden violence. We will be the parents we wished we had, the parents our children deserve." His words comforted her, and as the months passed and her belly grew round, Lydia found herself growing excited about the new life taking shape inside her. Sarah helped her sew tiny clothes and knit soft blankets. Tom built a beautiful cradle from oak wood, spending hours sanding and polishing until it was smooth as glass. The ranch hands took bets on whether the baby would be a boy or a girl, and everyone had advice about names and child rearing and everything in between. In May of 1884, Lydia went into labor on a warm spring day when the prairie was covered in wildflowers. Sarah and the local midwife attended her, while Jake paced outside the bedroom, wearing a path in the floorboards with his anxious strides. After several hours of hard labor, Lydia gave birth to a healthy baby boy with dark hair like his father and pale blue eyes that would eventually turn the same warm brown as his mother's. They named him James Thomas Keller, after Jake's father and Tom Henderson, the two men who had most influenced Jake's understanding of what it meant to be a good man. When Jake finally held his son, tears streaming down his weathered face, Lydia felt her heart fill to bursting. This was what she had been searching for all along, though she had not known it during those dark days in White River. This feeling of belonging, of being part of something larger than herself, of creating new life and new possibilities. As she watched her husband cradle their infant son, whispering promises of love and protection, Lydia thought about how far she had come. She had been broken, had believed herself beyond repair. But with Jake's help, with the support of good friends and honest work, she had not just survived. She had thrived. She had reclaimed her life and built something beautiful from the ashes of her failed first marriage. The years that followed were full of both challenges and joys. James grew into a rambunctious toddler who kept both his parents on their toes. 2 years after his birth, Lydia gave birth to a daughter they named Rose Sarah, for the wildflowers that carpeted the prairie each spring, and for the woman who had been like a mother to Lydia when she needed one most. Rose had her mother's delicate features and her father's easygoing temperament, a happy baby who rarely cried and smiled at everyone. The ranch continued to prosper under Tom's management and Jake's capable oversight. They added more cattle, bought additional land, built new outbuildings. Jake's reputation as a fair and skilled foreman spread, and other ranchers often sought his advice on managing their operations. Lydia's garden grew larger each year, producing enough vegetables that she was able to sell the surplus in town, saving the money toward the children's future education. In 1887, word reached them through Mrs. Patterson that Marcus Whitfield had left White River. Apparently, his reputation had been so damaged by the scandal of Lydia leaving him that his business had suffered. He had sold his property and moved somewhere back east, possibly returning to his family in Pennsylvania. The news should have filled Lydia with relief, but instead she felt mostly indifference. Marcus was part of her past, a chapter that had closed long ago. Her present and her future were with Jake and their children, and that was all that truly mattered. Tom and Sarah's children grew up alongside James and Rose, the 4 of them becoming as close as siblings. Tom had spoken seriously with Jake about eventually passing the ranch down to him, saying that while Emma and William loved the ranch, neither of them seemed inclined toward the hard work of running it. Jake had been honored but insisted that any such arrangement wait until Tom was ready to retire, which seemed unlikely to happen anytime soon given Tom's robust health and continued enthusiasm for ranching. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Jake surprised Lydia with a trip to Rapid City. They left the children with Sarah and spent 3 days exploring the growing city, eating at nice restaurants and staying in a hotel with hot running water and electric lights that had recently been installed. On their last evening, Jake took her dancing at a social hall where a small orchestra played waltzes and reels. As they swayed together on the dance floor, Lydia rested her head on Jake's shoulder and let herself feel the full weight of her contentment. "Thank you," she murmured. "For what?" Jake asked, his lips brushing her temple. "For everything. For saving me that day in White River, for being patient while I healed, for loving me so completely, for giving me this life, these children, this happiness. I never imagined I could feel this way, that I could be this happy." Jake pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "You saved yourself, Lydia. You were the one brave enough to leave, to ask for help, to fight for your freedom. I just happened to be there at the right moment. And as for the rest, well, you have given me just as much. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. You have given me a family, a purpose beyond just work. You have taught me what real partnership looks like, what it means to build a life together rather than just existing alongside someone. So thank you too." They kissed there on the dance floor, oblivious to the other couples swirling around them, lost in their own world of hard-won happiness and deep, abiding love. By 1890, James was 6 years old and Rose was 4, both of them bright, curious children who brought endless joy and occasional chaos to the household. Lydia had started teaching at the White River Schoolhouse again, this time on a more permanent basis. The previous teacher had moved to California, and the school board had approached Lydia about taking the position. After discussing it with Jake, she had agreed, on the condition that she could bring Rose with her until the little girl was old enough to attend school herself. The board had agreed readily, grateful to have an experienced teacher who was also respected in the community. Jake had been promoted to full partner in the Triple Bar Ranch when Tom finally admitted that his age was catching up with him, and he wanted to start stepping back from the day-to-day operations. The arrangement meant more responsibility for Jake, but also a secure future for his family. He and Tom worked well together, Jake's youthful energy balanced by Tom's decades of experience. On a cool October evening, the extended ranch family gathered for dinner at the main house. It had become a weekly tradition, a time for everyone to reconnect and share the week's news. Emma was now 15 and talking about attending a women's college back east, a prospect that both thrilled and terrified Sarah. William, at 13, was already as tall as his father and spent every free moment working with the horses, showing a natural gift for training them. As they sat around the big kitchen table, passing bowls of food and talking over each other in the comfortable way of family, Lydia looked around and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was her family now, not just through blood but through choice and love and shared experiences. These people had taken her in when she had nothing, had protected her, and helped her rebuild her life. They had celebrated her victories and supported her through her struggles. They had become the safe harbor she had always longed for. After dinner, when the children were playing outside and the adults were lingering over coffee, Sarah raised her cup in a toast. "To family," she said, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Not always the one we are born into, but the one we choose and the one that chooses us back." "To family," everyone echoed, clinking cups. Later that night, after they had returned to their own house and the children were tucked into bed, Jake and Lydia sat together on their porch. The night was clear and cold, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Jake had his arm around Lydia's shoulders and she was nestled against his side, a blanket wrapped around both of them. "You ever think about that first day?" Lydia asked quietly. "When you found me in Mrs. Patterson's store, sometimes. I think about how scared you looked, how hurt. I think about how angry it made me that someone had treated you that way. And I think about how grateful I am that I walked into that store at that exact moment, that I was given the chance to help you. I was so afraid then. Afraid of Marcus, afraid of being alone, afraid of what would happen to me. But I was also afraid to trust you, afraid to believe that any man could be different from Marcus. You could have given up on me so many times during those early months, when I was suspicious of every kindness and jumped at sudden movements. But you never did. You just kept being steady and patient and kind until I finally believed it was real. Jake pressed a kiss to the top of her head. You were worth the patience. You are worth everything, Lydia. You have made my life richer and fuller than I ever imagined it could be. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Lydia thought about the winding path that had brought her to this moment, this place. The pain of her first marriage had felt insurmountable at the time, like a wound that would never heal. But time and love and the simple act of building a new life had proven that even the deepest hurts could fade. She would never forget what she had endured with Marcus. Those scars were part of her story, part of what had shaped her into the woman she was now, but they no longer defined her. She was not just a victim who had escaped. She was a wife, a mother, a teacher, a friend. She was a woman who had found her strength and her voice. She was a woman who was deeply loved and who loved deeply in return. "Thank you," she whispered again, the words inadequate for everything she felt. Jake just held her closer, understanding as he always did exactly what she meant. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of ordinary moments and extraordinary milestones. James started school and proved to be a natural student, devouring books with the same enthusiasm his mother had shown at his age. Rose revealed an artistic talent, filling page after page with drawings of horses and flowers and her family. They added another child to their family in 1892, another son they named Henry, who had his mother's light brown hair and his father's easy smile. The Triple Bar Ranch continued to thrive, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. Jake's partnership with Tom proved fruitful, and they expanded into breeding quality horses in addition to running cattle. Lydia's reputation as a teacher grew, and she found deep satisfaction in shaping young minds and helping children discover their own potential. In 1895, Emma returned from college with a teaching certificate and a passion for education reform. She took a position at a school in Rapid City, determined to improve educational opportunities for all children regardless of their background. William stayed on at the ranch, taking over more and more of the daily operations as Tom fully retired to focus on his grandchildren and his beloved wife. Through all the changes and growth, Jake and Lydia's relationship remained the steady center of their lives. They still stole moments alone when they could, still talked late into the night about everything and nothing, still looked at each other with the wonder of people who knew how lucky they were to have found each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jake gave Lydia a leather-bound journal. "For your stories," he said. "You have lived through so much, experienced so many things. I think you should write it down, so our children and grandchildren will know where they came from, will understand the courage it took for you to build this life." Lydia started writing that very night, filling page after page with memories both painful and joyful. She wrote about her childhood in Chicago, about her naive arrival in White River, about the slow descent into fear during her marriage to Marcus. She wrote about that crucial moment in Mrs. Patterson's store when she had finally admitted she needed help, about Jake's quiet promise to keep her safe. But mostly, she wrote about the after. About learning to trust again, about falling in love with a good man, about building a family and a life rooted in respect and partnership. About discovering that she was stronger than she had ever imagined, that she was capable of not just surviving but thriving. When she finally showed Jake what she had written, he read it with tears in his eyes. "This is beautiful," he said, "and important. Every woman who has ever felt trapped, every person who has ever doubted their own strength, needs to read this. You are living proof that it is possible to escape, to start over, to build something beautiful from the ashes of trauma." "We built it together," Lydia corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you." "We built it together," Jake agreed, pulling her close. "And I would not have it any other way." By the turn of the century, the Keller family had become a fixture in White River and the surrounding community. Their eldest son, James, was 14 and already showing signs of his father's leadership qualities, helping manage the ranch hands during the summer months. Rose, at 12, divided her time between her artwork and helping her mother at the schoolhouse. Henry, now 8, was the wild child of the family, always getting into some scrape or another, but with such charm that it was impossible to stay angry with him for long. Lydia and Jake had expanded their home, adding more rooms to accommodate their growing family. The house was always full of noise and laughter, of friends and neighbors stopping by, of children running in and out. It was everything Lydia had never known she wanted, the kind of warm, chaotic family life she had dreamed about during those lonely years with Marcus. Tom Henderson passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1902, his death mourned by everyone who had known him. He had lived a full life and died surrounded by family, exactly as he had wished. At his funeral, Jake gave a moving eulogy about the man who had given him a chance, who had taught him what it meant to be a fair boss and a good man. Lydia held Sarah's hand throughout the service, offering what comfort she could to the woman who had been like a mother to her. With Tom's passing, Jake became the full owner of the Triple Bar Ranch, a responsibility he took seriously, but also with deep gratitude. He ran the operation with the same fairness and integrity that Tom had taught him, earning loyalty from his workers and respect from his neighbors. The ranch continued to prosper, providing a good living not just for the Keller family, but for the dozen families who worked there as well. In 1905, James left for college, the first in either Jake or Lydia's family to pursue higher education. He wanted to study agriculture and business, planning to bring modern techniques back to the ranch. His departure left a hole in the household, but Lydia was proud of her son's ambition and determination. Rose was talking about attending an art school, her talent having caught the attention of a visiting artist who encouraged her to pursue formal training. Through all these changes, Jake and Lydia remained each other's anchor. They had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs, had raised children and built a legacy. Their love had deepened over the years, maturing from the passionate intensity of new romance into something richer and more complex, something built on shared history and unwavering commitment. On a warm June evening in 1908, celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary, Jake and Lydia sat on their porch watching the sun set, just as they had done countless times before. Their children were grown or nearly so, their grandchildren not yet arrived, but anticipated with joy. The ranch was thriving, their community was strong, their life together was everything they had hoped it would be. 25 years, Lydia mused, her hand clasped in Jake's. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like no time at all. Best 25 years of my life, Jake said. Every single day with you has been a gift. Even the hard days, the sleepless nights with sick children, the years when the drought threatened the ranch, the times when I was difficult and stubborn, especially those days, Jake said with a smile. Because those were the days when we proved that our love was strong enough to weather anything. Those were the days when we showed each other and ourselves what we were really made of. Lydia leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. I love you, Jake Keller. I have loved you for so long now that I cannot really remember what it was like not to love you. You are part of me, woven into every aspect of my life. And I love you, Lydia Keller. From that first moment in Mrs. Patterson's store until my last breath, you have my whole heart. You always will. They sat together as the stars came out, just as they had done so many times before and would do many times again. The prairie stretched out before them, endless and beautiful, full of possibility. Behind them, their home glowed with light and warmth, testament to everything they had built together. Lydia thought about the girl she had been, bruised and terrified in that general store so many years ago. She thought about the woman she had become, strong, confident, deeply loved and loving in return. The journey between those 2 points had not been easy or straightforward. There had been pain and fear and moments when she had doubted she would ever feel whole again, but she had persevered. With Jake's help and her own determination, she had reclaimed her life and built something more beautiful than she had ever imagined possible. She had proven that love did not have to hurt, that partnership could mean lifting each other up rather than tearing each other down, that it was possible to heal even from the deepest wounds. As the night deepened around them and Jake's arm tightened around her shoulders, Lydia felt at peace. Her story, which had begun in such darkness, had found its way to light. And every day, every moment she spent with this good man and the family they had created together was a celebration of survival and healing and hope. The future stretched out before them, unknown but no longer frightening. Whatever came, they would face it together, just as they had faced everything else. And that knowledge, that certainty of their partnership, was the greatest gift of all. Years continued to roll by, marked by the steady rhythm of ranch life and the milestones of their growing family. James graduated from college and returned to the Triple Bar Ranch with new ideas about sustainable ranching practices and better breeding programs. He married a smart, capable woman named Elizabeth from Rapid City, and in 1910, they gave Jake and Lydia their first grandchild, a daughter named Margaret. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Lydia wept with joy. This tiny, perfect baby represented not just a new generation, but also the complete triumph over her past. Margaret would grow up in a home filled with love and security, would never know the fear that had once dominated her grandmother's life. She would be raised by parents who respected each other, who modeled healthy partnership and mutual support. The cycle of violence that had touched Lydia's life ended with her. Everything that came after was built on a foundation of love. Rose did eventually attend art school in Chicago, the same city where Lydia had grown up. She sent home letters filled with descriptions of her classes and the bustling city life, along with sketches that showed her rapidly developing talent. She exhibited her work in several shows and eventually opened her own studio, becoming a respected artist whose paintings captured the beauty and harshness of frontier life. Henry, true to his adventurous nature, spent several years exploring the West before eventually settling in Montana, where he started his own ranch. He married a ranch owner's daughter and raised horses, building a reputation as one of the finest horse trainers in the region. Though he lived far from White River, he visited often, always bringing stories of his adventures and mischief that kept his nieces and nephews entertained for hours. Sarah Henderson lived to be nearly 80, passing away peacefully in 1912, surrounded by her children and the extended family she had helped build. At her funeral, Lydia spoke about the woman who had taken her in when she had nowhere else to go, who had shown her what strength and kindness looked like, who had been mother, friend, and mentor all in one. Her loss was deeply felt by everyone who had known her, but her legacy lived on in the values she had instilled: and the love she had shared. Jake and Lydia grew old together, their hair turning silver, their hands developing the calluses and wrinkles of a lifetime of honest work. But their love never faded. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experiences and weathered hardships. They took pride in their children's accomplishments and delighted in their grandchildren, of which there were eventually 7. The ranch house was always full during holidays. 3 generations gathered around the big table, sharing food and stories and laughter. In 1920, on a crisp autumn day much like the one when they had first met, Jake and Lydia took a ride together out to their favorite spot overlooking the ranch. They were both in their 60s now, but still capable of a few hours in the saddle. They sat together on a flat rock, watching the cattle graze in the distance and the ranch hands go about their work. "You ever regret it?" Lydia asked suddenly. "Taking on a broken woman with so much baggage?" "Your life would have been simpler if you had just walked past Mrs. Patterson's store that day." Jake turned to look at her, his dark eyes still as warm and steady as they had been nearly 40 years earlier. "Simpler, maybe, but infinitely poorer. You are not now and have never been broken, Lydia." "Wounded, yes. Hurt by someone who should have protected you, absolutely, but never broken. You were always strong, always capable of healing and growing. I just had the privilege of being there while it happened, of witnessing your courage firsthand." "You saved me," Lydia insisted. "We saved each other," Jake corrected. "You gave my life meaning beyond just work and survival. You taught me what real partnership looks like, what it means to build something together rather than existing in parallel. You gave me children and grandchildren, filled my days with love and laughter. So no, I have never once regretted that day in the store. It was the luckiest day of my life." Lydia leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of him, marveling as she always did at how safe she felt in his presence. "I love you, Jake Keller. Thank you for keeping your promise, for keeping me safe all these years." "I love you too, Lydia Keller, and I will keep that promise until my last breath. You are safe with me always." They sat together as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The prairie stretched out before them, the same endless landscape that had witnessed their first meeting, their courtship, their marriage, the raising of their family. It was harsh land, unforgiving to those who were not strong enough to meet its challenges. But it was also beautiful, full of possibility for those brave enough to claim it. Lydia thought about all the years that lay behind them, all the challenges they had overcome, all the joy they had created together. She thought about the girl she had been, desperate and afraid, and the woman she had become, confident and loved. The journey had not been easy, but it had been worth every difficult step. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jake helped her mount her horse for the ride back to the ranch. Their home waited for them, warm and welcoming, filled with the evidence of their life together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments to cherish. But tonight, riding side by side through the gathering darkness, Lydia felt completely at peace. She had been hurt by a man she trusted, had known the depths of fear and despair. But she had also known the heights of love and healing. A cowboy had promised to keep her safe, and he had kept that promise every single day since. Together, they had built something beautiful and lasting, a legacy of love that would continue long after they were gone. As they approached the lights of home, Lydia smiled. Her story, which had begun in such darkness, had found its way not just to light but to joy, not just to survival but to thriving. And that, she thought, was the greatest triumph of all.